I
Yeah.
was saying Cesar, so I apologize. I'm from
Oh,
Detroit, so we have weird
yeah.
R's.
Yeah, I get that all the time where, people want to pronounce it all fancy and it's like, I'm not like
Okay, well, I'm here talking to Cesar
that. Lemus.
Lemus, and we were just talking about the best tips that he could, um, what's the word, promote and pass off to younger artists. And one of the facts that you were just mentioning was like delivering on time.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand a little bit about that?
Just pretty much, say you have like a scene that's due like at the end of the day, it's always good to just make sure you get it done and finished. And by done and finished, I mean like even if the last couple of frames are like a little bit rough and looser than the other ones, that's still good because like the longer you make the client wait to see your stuff, the more they have to like, hold off on other things that they got to do. So, it's always a good thing to, say, you know, if all you got to do is like just a couple of lines and do line work, then that's good enough. You don't have to do like all shadow and tone all the time
Hmm.
because you can always
We
go back and fix that later too as well.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, we've had a whole month about the finishing touches. This month we're talking more about freelance and the the things that you can do to set yourself up for success when you're not connected to a studio in that environment. But one of the
Yeah,
months we had finishing touches, and like that letting go is such a big part of the process, because like you can really hold on to a project, and that holding on can be more detrimental. So it's
yeah,
yeah, it's nice that you brought that back. It's I always enjoy when the topics overrun into each other, because it
right.
just means how it just shows how important they are. Um,
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of times you can spend a bunch of time like on one frame, you can kind of zone out and forget how much time is going by.
mhm, hitting that flow state.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so if delivering on time would be your first piece of advice, what do you think would be your next piece of advice for artists? Like what would be
Oh,
just as
wow.
important?
I'd say probably always be prepared. Like I've had tons of times where like, I went in with all my equipment and say my scanner wasn't working or for some reason something was being weird with my laptop. So if that was the case, I'd switch over to doing my drawings on paper and pencil, or if my laptop wasn't working, I had my iPad and I could always do my boards on my iPad. So I always kind of made sure to kind of have like a backup just in case, because stuff happens, even though, you know, clients don't think they do, you always, I make it a point too where I would buy like two, I'd buy like a backup Wacom pencil because a lot of times I remember one time I forgot it at home, so I was like, so I always made sure to have a spare one somewhere else. You have your gear that you can be mobile with, and then you have your gear that's at home. Because a lot of
It's
times, if you freelance, you don't always get the opportunity to have somebody say, "Here's a desk, draw and get to work." A lot of times they'd be
yeah,
like, "Okay, I guess go home and start working on your stuff." So
yeah. You are your own IT team.
yeah, you're your own boss. You gotta like figure stuff out. Like if you gotta go back home and work on your stuff and say there's like tons of traffic on the freeway and all that time is burning up, it's like, what are you gonna do? What I would do is I'd go find like a coffee shop or a library and I'd just start cranking stuff out till the traffic died down
Hmm.
because all that stuff takes time. You don't want to be sitting in traffic for 2 hours when you could you could get so much work done and so many boards done in 2 hours. So,
What I'm curious about is how many traffic jams did you sit in before you had that realization?
yeah, probably like I think 2 or 3. I was like, yeah, this is not working. I gotta do something. And I
Yeah.
always made sure, whenever I had to show up to an appointment, I made sure to make sure I gave myself enough time because, there's either a traffic jam or they're closing off the freeway, your car gets a flat tire. So if you gotta show up to somewhere like an hour before just to make sure you get there on time, do it.
Yeah. You're reminding me of like, and I won't go into this, but you're reminding me of this one time I had, it was like a bamboo ink pen and it needed a very special battery. And I had this pen, it worked. And then when I went to go use this pen, it didn't work. And I
Oh,
had to go in a wild goose hunt to find this battery in a city that I was new in. And
yeah.
the battery ended up costing a fortune. And
Oh,
I bought two because I was like, if this ever happens again, I don't want to be in
yeah,
this. And I
yeah,
never kept the battery in the pen ever again.
yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
wish you wish they made them batteryless like the Wacom ones.
hmm. I don't, do they do that now? Is that new? Like, can you just, I mean, I guess there's no battery in here. I have no idea
Yeah,
how.
yeah, it's always working. Kind of like it's a little bit different with the Apple Pencil. You got to connect it to the thing so it charges. It's like they're using, I forget what the technology is, but man, I wish they would do it like that because it's a pain in the butt having to wait for your pen to charge or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, I never really thought about it. Well, I'm not a drawer, so
Yeah,
never thought about it, but I can see how that would be really frustrating.
yeah.
Okay. So if deliver on time, always have a backup plan are two of your strategies to talk about freelance. What else is there? What else could you suggest to any freelance storyboard artist or artist in general on how to
Um,
prepare for work?
uh, Another thing would be kind of like, and this is more for the creative aspect of the job, is like I'm always open to, watching all kinds of stuff and studying all kinds of things like animation, commercials, movies, old movies, video games, all that stuff. Directors, like, how directors shoot and how they work, you know, a lot of cinematographers, how they light stuff and frame things in the screen, all that stuff kind of contributes to your creativity and lets you, figure out cool things because a lot of times you might get a client that'll have an idea and then they might ask you to suggest something and they'll be like, hey, that's really cool. I like that. And a lot of that just comes from studying other things and kind of absorbing it. Because like I always wanted to have like a cool mentor when I was growing up, but it kind of,
Mhm.
for me, the mentorship kind of like showed up a little bit late, but I was still
Yeah.
appreciative of it. But I always was like the sole guy working on something because when you freelance a lot of the times you're like the only dude unless you're working like say on a film or a video game. A lot of times they might have like a crew of storyboard guys. I always wanted that because I always wanted to have the camaraderie of other peers. And I eventually got that a few times, but I think like 80% of my job was always like I'm the single only guy. When I'm done with work, it's like, oh, I want to go hang out with somebody. And,
Yeah. I think that that community aspect is the loss of community at that aspect is
yeah,
probably the hardest for a lot of people, especially a lot of
yeah,
creatives. We
yeah,
probably all felt that a little bit in the pandemic, and the work from home, but I know that that's really
yeah,
like the idea of freelance is almost more prominent now because even if you do work for a studio, sometimes supervisors are not as present as if you were in studio. So you feel like you're a freelancer even if you are working directly for a studio and supposedly have that backup.
yeah,
So I think that's a good one. Um, uh,
yeah. Because a lot of it is like, that's one form of networking. Because a lot of those guys will go on to other projects, and if they need someone to call on when they need somebody else,
yeah,
guess who? Hey, I worked with this guy, and I mean, like probably 90% of my getting work was because I knew somebody else and they referred me. You know, even though I got into the union at one point, it was still the networking stuff that really got me the work. You know,
yeah.
and I
Um,
always wanted to be in that position to pay somebody back because it's a good feeling.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's been my goal as well. It's it feels even better to pay people back right now, if that makes
Oh yeah,
sense. Like
yeah,
this is the time when we got to be helping each other out,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
I've had a few people where I was like, man, they realized I'm like looking for work for a long time, and I'm like trying not to be a drama queen about it, but I'm like, oh, you got to pay bills and do all this stuff. And luckily, a few people were like, hey, there's this thing. If you want it, let me know. It's like, awesome.
Yeah, it always comes at that last nick of time too. It always feels like that's to me that's when hope always shows up. Hope always shows up at that last minute.
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah. So yeah. Okay. Well, do you have any last, we can wrap up, but do you have any last minute, real quick tips for freelancers or people working by themselves? Maybe about like how to be organized. How to
Okay.
be
Uh,
organized.
I would say, you could always ask like other artists how they do it and see what kind of works for you. Because
Hmm.
I'm very what would you say? Like, I think I have a really short attention span. So, like, I wish I kind of would have known that this job requires you to be like laser focused, and that's how you get all
Yeah.
your stuff done.
Hmm.
But, if you freelance, it's a lot different than working in the studio because in the studio, it's like a lot easier to be organized because everybody's looking at you and you're like, you got to look busy. So, but when you're at home, it's like, hey, nobody's here to check on me. I can go do this and that. You gotta have a lot of self discipline and be like, okay, I'm gonna work on this for so many hours, whatever. Take lunch and then
Um,
come back to
well, do you know, this is one of my favorite facts, and one of the things that I try and practice because I'm really big on balance and balancing exercises. But did you know that you can practice focusing through exercise?
it. No, I did not know.
So just a fun
I
fact.
figured there's gotta be a good reason for it too.
It's so it actually so some of the exercises that you can do, anything that you practice when you practice balancing, so it right down from like if you're practicing balancing on one foot, like you're just standing on one foot, if you can practice doing 3 minutes a day to 5 minutes a day, It's
Got it.
actually balancing and working out. I forget if I want to say it's your prefrontal cortex, but that's
Okay.
your ability to focus. And so if you're
Oh,
struggling to
wow.
focus, try to stand on your foot for 3 minutes,
Nice.
and then you get to 5. But yeah,
That's good. That kind of
uh,
makes sense because a lot of times when I find it hard to focus, I'm going like this, trying
yeah,
to focus.
yeah. No, don't hit yourself in the head. Just start
Yeah.
balancing on one foot, and that'll help you out. It is really what become one of my favorite exercises. And I have wobble boards, and
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I have surfboards, and I have they're balance boards really, but you
Yeah.
basically are balancing on a pipe, and so you're trying to keep level. And I do a lot of my exercises on there, but that's how you develop like better focusing habits, is like actually by
Okay.
exercising. So,
Very
but
cool.
start with standing on one foot. But okay, I want
Cool.
to say thank you so much for taking this time, and
Yeah.
we can
Thank
wrap
you.
this up. Yeah, and we're looking like Eat Your Peas is really excited to have you as a mentor this month, and we'll dive into these
Awesome.
topics a little bit further, and we'll be providing feedback. So if anybody wants
Cool.
their boards reviewed by Cesar, or if anybody wants some guidance on what the next steps in their career are, Cesar's going to be available one night in June. So stay tuned and join the Discord
Awesome.
for that. Yeah. So thanks again,
Very
Cesar.
cool. Cool. Thank you, Lindsay.